Some singers are born to sing, but Philippe Wynne, he was born to feel. His voice didn't just carry notes, it carried truth. When he sang, it wasn't from the throat, it came straight from the ache in his chest, the kind only real soul man knew. Smooth like silk, sharp like pain. And every time you heard that trembling falsetto slide across a record, you knew it was him, the voice, that could make grown men cry and make women close their eyes, remembering someone they once loved. He wasn't the flashiest. He wasn't the richest. But he was the realest. As the lead voice of the Detroit Spinners, Philippe Wynne helped define what 1972nd soul truly sounded like: elegance, fire, and heartbreak dancing together. From "I'll Be Around" to "Could It Be I'm Falling in Love." His tone made the world stop for 3 minutes at a time. Even Stevie Wonder called his sound liquid gold. But behind that velvet voice was a man who carried pain since childhood. A boy left behind, a soldier, a drifter, and finally, a legend who died the same way he lived, on stage, giving everything he had. This is the story of Philippe Wynne, the soul behind the Spinners, a man who turned heartbreak into harmony, and whose final song ended not with applause, but with silence. Philippe Wynne was born Philippe Walker, April 3rd, 1941, Cincinnati, Ohio, a city built on blues and brick, where voices carried pain like prayer. From the start, he learned that survival wasn't a privilege, it was an art. His parents, Degree Walker and Anna Wynne Walker, sang in church, but love in that house came and went like a passing hymn. When his mother left home for Detroit with another man, Philippe was just 6. His father, too proud and too broken, placed the children into the new orphan asylum for colored children. Imagine that a boy growing up, knowing both his parents were alive, but choosing to live without him. That kind of wound never heals. It just finds a rhythm. At the orphanage, nights were long. The halls echoed with cries and gospel humming. But Philippe had something the others didn't, a sound. He'd hum old church songs into the dark until sleep took him, voice trembling like a candle in wind. That's how he survived. He sang his way through the silence. After 5 years behind those walls, Philippe and his brother Michael couldn't take it anymore. One night, they ran. Michael went to Detroit searching for their mother. Philippe stayed behind in Cincinnati, torn between blood and abandonment. He worked odd jobs, anything that kept him moving. And at 15, desperate for purpose, he lied about his age and joined the U.S. Army. The Army didn't just give him a uniform, it gave him escape. He learned the discipline, structure, and pain all over again. He worked as a medical specialist, treating wounds on the outside while nursing his own inside. But in the barracks, during long nights in foreign bases, Philippe found music again. He boxed to stay sharp and sang to stay alive. They said he could turn even military drills into melody. And one night, performing at a small bass club, he met a man who'd changed his life, Otis Redding, the god of soul himself. Otis heard him sing and said, "That boy got fire in his throat." Philippe ended up touring with Otis's band for a while, learning what it meant to make people feel something. 7 years later, when he returned home, the world had changed, and so had he. He carried himself like a man twice his age, voice deeper, spirit wiser. But inside, he was still that boy from the orphanage, still searching for love that wouldn't leave. He joined his brother Michael in Detroit, forming a gospel group called the Walker Singers. But gospel didn't pay the bills. And Philippe had tasted the applause of nightclubs, the roar of sinners clapping louder than saints. So he left the church, dropped his father's name Walker, and took his mother's name Wynne. He added an E at the end, maybe to make it whole again, maybe just to make it his own. That's how Philippe Wynne was born, not from fame, not from luck, but from pain, faith, and a voice that refused to stay quiet. A boy who sang not for attention, but because it was the only way he knew how to live. By the early 1972nd, soul music had new kings. And Philippe Wynne was about to wear the crown, not in gold, but in voice. After drifting through bands and gospel choirs, Felipe's path finally led him to Detroit, the city his mother once ran to. There, music was currency, Motown, Funk Brothers, and dreams pressed into vinyl. But for Felipe, it wasn't fame he was chasing. It was home. And he found it in 5 men with matching suits, big smiles, and harmonies that could melt the hardest crowd, the Spinners. When Felipe joined the group in 1972, the Spinners had already tasted small success under Motown, but never the full spotlight. That changed when Aretha Franklin herself told them to leave Motown for Atlantic Records, where producer Tom Bell and songwriter Linda Creed were redefining soul with strings, horns, and heartbreak. It was the birth of Philadelphia soul, and Philippe Wynne became its heartbeat. In 1973, they released their self-titled album, The Spinners. The World Stop, I'll Be Around became an anthem. Bobby Smith's smooth tone carried the melody, but when Felipe's voice slipped in on harmony, it was lightning wrapped in velvet. Then came Could It Be I'm Falling in Love. That song didn't just play on the radio, it lived in people's living rooms. Couples slow danced to it. Soldiers wrote home to it. Every note Felipe sang sounded like both a promise and a prayer. By 1974, they released Mighty Love, and the title said it all. With each record, Felipe's falsetto grew sharper, more intimate, as if he wasn't singing to the audience, but for them. His live performances were electric. He didn't just sing, he preached. He dropped to his knees mid-song, sweat glistening under the lights, shouting, "Can you feel it?" And the crowd always could. When the Spinners performed Sadie in 1974, something shifted. That song, a son's tribute to his mother, became personal for Felipe. He'd lost his own mother to distance, not death, but the ache was the same. When he sang, "Sadie, don't you know we love you?" the band swore they saw tears behind his glasses. Audiences didn't just hear that song, they felt it in their bones. By 1975, they were unstoppable. Games People Play, One of a Kind Love Affair, and The Rubber Band Man. Each song another chapter in the book of American soul. They were men from Detroit who'd turned pain into platinum. And Felipe was their engine, the mix of gospel, fire, and street rhythm no producer could ever design. He was flamboyant, eccentric, sometimes reckless. But on stage, he was divine. Fans called him Soul Wynne, because that's what he gave every time he opened his mouth. Soul that won you over. Soul that stayed after the lights went out. By the mid-70s, the Spinners weren't just a group. They were a movement, the sound of romance before disco, the last breath of true love songs. And at the center of it stood Philippe Wynne, a man who had turned survival into song and heartbreak into harmony. For a while, it seemed he had finally outrun his pain. But in the music industry, applause can be the loudest kind of loneliness. And soon, that silence would find him again. By 1977, Philippe Wynne had the world gold records. Fame, women screaming his name. But sometimes, success whispers, lies louder than failure. People around him started saying the same thing. You don't need the Spinners. You are the Spinners. It was the same poison that had broken so many soul groups before: ego, money, the myth of me. Felipe began to believe it. He wanted his name in lights. He wanted the group renamed Philippe Wynne and the Spinners. But the others, Billy Henderson, Henry Fambro, Purvis Jackson, they said no. They'd build that legacy together, and they weren't about to let it become one man's crown. The tension grew. Rehearsals turned cold. And one night after a show, Felipe simply said, "If my name ain't on it, I'm gone." And he was. He hired actor Alan Thicke as his manager. Yes, the same Alan Thicke who'd go on to play the father in Growing Pains. Alan believed Felipe could cross over from soul clubs to TV stages, from Detroit rhythm to Hollywood polish. They signed with Cotillion Records, a branch of Atlantic, and in 1977, Felipe released his first solo album, Starting All Over. But the irony was cruel, because he wasn't starting over. He was starting alone. The album flopped. No radio play, no tours, no chart. The same voice that once carried stadiums now struggled to fill small clubs. And Felipe, proud, stubborn, and restless, turned back to the only thing that ever made him feel alive: performing. He joined Bootsy Collins and George Clinton's Parliament Funkadelic crew, lending his voice to Not Just, Knee Deep, a funk masterpiece that would later be sampled by De La Soul in Me, Myself, and I. For a moment, it looked like redemption. But funk wasn't home. It was chaos, dressed as freedom. Felipe bounced between record labels, Uncle Jam Records, Sugar Hill, chasing one more hit, one more taste of that high. In 1983, he released his final solo album, simply titled Philippe Wynne. And like so many greats before him, it disappeared into silence. Then came the road, endless nights, cheap motels, small town bars. He played wherever someone remembered. The Spinners. No entourage, no big lights. Just Felipe and a microphone. On Friday, the 13th of July, 1984, he was performing at a small club called Ivy's in Oakland, California. About 200 people in the crowd. He gave everything that night: sweat, laughter, soul. The crowd begged for encores. He kept coming back, singing as if he could outrun time itself. And then it happened. During the song Love Don't Love Nobody, the song that made him immortal, he dropped the mic. And then he fell, right there in the audience, surrounded by fans who thought he was still performing. He was 43 years old. A nurse and 2 police officers tried to revive him, but it was too late. His heart, the same heart that carried 1,000 songs, simply stopped. At his funeral, only 8 people came. 8. For a man whose voice had once filled arenas. Maybe that's the cruel truth of fame. It amplifies your voice, but not your life. And Philippe Wynne, the man who once made the world dance, died in the quiet, his music still echoing somewhere between heaven and heartbreak. When news broke that Philippe Wynne had collapsed and died on stage, the music world didn't quite know how to react. There was no breaking headline, no midnight tribute special, just a quiet rumor traveling through radio stations and record stores. The voice from the Spinners is gone. For those who knew, it felt like losing a piece of soul itself. Because Felipe wasn't just another singer, he was a feeling. He sang pain the way poets wrote it, with elegance and fire. Every riff, every falsetto, every trembling note was proof that emotion could have sound. But the industry moved fast, too fast. By the mid-80s, R&B was chasing new sounds. Digital beats, drum machines, MTV glitz. And there was no room for the man who sang about love that didn't love back. Still, among musicians, his legend only grew. George Clinton once said, Felipe was the only cat who could sing like an angel and curse like a sinner in the same breath. And Bootsy Collins, remembering their nights on the road, said, he wasn't chasing hits, he was chasing a feeling. That's why you believed him. Inside Detroit, the city that raised him and broke him, radio DJs began quietly spinning Sadie again. Not as nostalgia, but as respect. Because that voice, that trembling, gospel-born, heartbroken voice, had defined a generation's idea of love. Meanwhile, the Spinners kept performing. Decades rolled on. New members came and went. But they never forgot the man who gave their harmonies a soul. In interviews, they spoke his name softly like a prayer. Henry Fambro, the last surviving original member, once said, when we sing Love Don't Love Nobody, I still hear him in my head. It's like he never left the stage. And maybe he didn't. Because Philippe Wynne's story, a child of pain, a man of melody, a soul that burned too bright, became a mirror for what American soul really is. Beauty born from struggle. Today, younger singers from Maxwell to Anderson, Pac cite him as an invisible influence. That raspy tenderness, that fearless vulnerability, it all traces back to him, to the man who turned loneliness into harmony. Detroit eventually honored the Spinners with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame and a place in the Vocal Group Hall of Fame. But for many fans, the real tribute to Philippe Wynne happens every time. Could it be I'm Falling in Love comes on late at night? Because his voice still does what it always did. Make you stop, close your eyes, and feel something too deep to explain. Philippe Wynne never chased immortality. He sang it into existence. They say some voices fade when the lights go out. Philippe Wynne's never did. Even now, decades later, you can still hear him somewhere between a whisper and a wail, telling the truth about love, loss, and loneliness. He didn't just sing soul music. He was soul music. Every time a record needle touches Sadie, every time someone hums, "Could it be I'm falling in love?" that voice returns smooth, trembling, holy. A reminder that some emotions can't die because they were never born from this world to begin with. Philippe Wynne lived the kind of life the industry doesn't talk about, the kind that doesn't end in mansions or awards, but in motel rooms, empty dressing rooms, and the echo of applause that fades too fast. But maybe that's what made him pure. He didn't chase charts. He chased connection. And in doing so, he gave a generation of dreamers, black, poor, hopeful, a reason to believe that beauty could come from broken places. For Detroit, Philippe's story is gospel. For the Spinners, it's legacy. And for anyone who's ever sung alone in the dark, it's a promise that your pain can still sound beautiful if you let it out. When he died on stage that July night, microphone slipping from his hand, some said it was tragic. But those who knew him best said it was poetic. He left this world the way he lived, mid-song, mid-breath, mid-heartbeat, giving everything he had to the music, until there was nothing left to give. His son Emmanuel Wynne, who died years later trying to save another man from drowning, was cut from the same cloth compassion born from courage. Even in death, the Wynne name carried the same spirit. Love that gives, even when it costs everything. And so, Philippe's legacy isn't just the records or the tours. It's the echo. It's the way his falsetto still finds you when you least expect it. In a diner, jukebox, a wedding, slow dance, a rainy drive home. It's the way he reminds you that every note matters, every hurt can heal, every soul can sing. In 1999, the Spinners were inducted into the Vocal Group Hall of Fame, and though Philippe wasn't there, his shadow was. Every member who stepped up to that stage carried him in their hearts, because for them, he wasn't just a bandmate, he was the pulse. When asked once what soul music meant to him, Philippe smiled and said, "It's when the pain sounds good." And maybe that's the only way to describe him. A man who made pain sound good enough to dance to. He was the voice that bled, the heart that refused to harden, and the man who sang until silence answered back. So tonight, somewhere out there, if you hear "Love Don't Love Nobody," don't just listen. Close your eyes. Feel it. Because that's not just a song. That's Philippe, still singing, still saving souls, one note at a time.